Life of Fred. Chapter 2. The Integers. The five of them sat down at the poker table. When they had first started playing poker on Thursday nights back in August, they had used a squared card table, but that didn't work out very well with 5 players. The ratio of the sides of the players to the sides of the table was 5 to 4. 5 players to 4 sides. Darlene didn't mind since she got to sit next to Joe. But everyone else did mind. Darlene couldn't concentrate on the game with Joe so close to her. Number 1. Number 2, Joe kept forgetting that you're supposed to keep your cards a secret. Whenever he got a good hand, he'd show it proudly to Darlene. To fix this situation, they got a new table. It was in the shape of a pentagon. Penta means 5. When Joe ordered the table from a custom table manufacturer on the internet, he had been asked if he wanted chip trays built into the top of the table. Since he figured that he might be winning a lot of pennies, he told the table manufacturer to put in lots and lots of trays. He had told Darlene that someday he'd win at this game after he got the hang of it. So there's the table with all the chip trays. So they made a table with lots and lots of trays, which left very little room to deal out the cards. The good news is that because it was the shape of a pentagon, the ratio of the sides of the people to the sides of the table was now 5 to 5. 5 people, 5 sides. The bad news is that Darlene couldn't sit as close to Joe as she wanted to. Well, what kind of poker shall we play tonight? Alexander asked as he shuffled the cards. In the past, they had played all the usual forms of poker: draw poker, stud poker, deuces wild, one-eyed jacks wild. But since they were all covered in the poker books that Fred had read, he continued to frequently be the winner. So the others at the table started to invent new poker games to try to eliminate Fred's advantage. Let's try multi-flip, Betty suggested. No one else at the table had ever heard of the game. That's because I've just invented multi-flip, she explained. We play regular poker, and after someone has won a really big pot with more than 20 cents in it, then we do a multi-flip. What's that? Fred asked. You'll see, Betty answered. Sometimes they invented the rules of the game as they played, and Fred found this a little disconcerting for his logical mind. He felt it was a little like what the Nazis used to do in passing a law today that made what you did yesterday illegal. You could be punished for doing something that was legal when you did it. First, said Betty, everyone write a number less than 10 on a piece of paper and fold it up and toss it in the center of the table. We'll pick one of those papers after someone's won a big hand. After several hands of play, Darlene won a really big hand of 30 cents. Okay, Betty continued her explanation. Darlene, please shut your eyes and pick one of the pieces of paper out of the center. Darlene got a paper and opened it. It's a 3 that I drew, she announced. Betty finished her explanation of multi-flip by saying, okay, you won not just 30 cents, but 3 times 30 cents. Darlene liked this game. She turned to Joe and said, honey, look how much I've won. He thought she meant that he should figure out how much she had won. So he got out a piece of paper and wrote 3 times 30 cents, which equals 90 cents. Alexander looked at his work and frowned a little. Joe went back and checked his work and couldn't see any error. He got out his calculator, and 3 times 30 cents was still 90 cents. What's wrong, Alexander? Joe asked. Joe explained that there was a danger of confusion. In algebra, they used x as an unknown, and the time symbol x that was used in elementary school isn't used for multiplication anymore. Well, how do you write it then? Joe wondered. Well, you can use parentheses and write 3 times 30. Sometimes they use a raised dot and write 3 times 30, but that can get confused with the decimal point. So Joe crossed out 3 times 30 cents equals 90 cents and wrote 3 times 30 cents equals 90 cents and smiled. Betty wrote on a slip of paper, New York, and passed it around the table to Alexander. He laughed at her joke about the famous newspaper. New York Times. It's a newspaper. Darlene also won the next big pot. That was even larger than the first one, 40 cents. There were 4 pieces of paper left in the middle of the table, and Betty urged her to draw another one. It read a half. It was in Fred's handwriting. Fred shrugged his shoulders a little and said, "You said it should be a number less than 10. 1/2 is less than 10 since it's to the left of 10 on the number line." He illustrated his remark on a napkin. 1/2 is less than 10. Fred continued, "In algebra, you can write 1/2 is less than 10, where the symbol means less than. On many keyboards, the less than symbol is on the comma key." Meanwhile, Joe was figuring out how much Darlene had won. He wrote 1/2 times 40 cents and then crossed that out and wrote 1/2 times 40 cents equals 20 cents. Betty scribbled another note to Alexander. 20 cents is less than 40 cents. To everyone's surprise, Joe won the biggest hand of the night. It was 70 cents. He reached in the center of the table and took a slip of paper. He already knew what it was since the paper was orange and he had written his number on orange paper. "What's the number?" Darlene asked excitedly. She and everyone else at the table knew that Joe had picked his own paper. She was hoping he had followed the rules and remembered to pick a number less than 10. Joe proudly announced, "The number is less than 2. There were several groans at the table. "Ah!" "But look," Joe cried. "-2 is to the left of 10, and so -2 is less than 10. He drew on the table. -2 less than 10. And Joe was correct. It was true that -2 was less than 10. Everyone agreed with him. "So what's the problem?" Joe inquired. Alexander finally broke the silence and said, "No problem at all. You owe 140 cents. Joe wrote on another part of the table, -2 times 70 cents, crossed that out, and then wrote -2 times 70 cents and hesitated. He didn't know how to multiply negative numbers times a positive number. Darlene whispered to him that a negative times a positive gives a negative answer. She said, "Suppose you had a speeding ticket for $5 and you didn't pay the fine. What would happen?" Joe responded that they would triple the fine. That would make the fine $15. So -5 times 3 is -15. Joe tried out some other multiplication of signed numbers. 3 times -7, -21. 2 times 12, -24. 5 times 7, +35. That was easy. -8 times 9, -72. Then he wrote -4 times -5 equals, and he was stuck. He knew it wasn't -20, since -4 times a +5 equaled -20, and he figured that -4 and -5 and -4 and a +5 couldn't have the same answer. Betty told him that a negative times a negative has a positive answer. -4 times a -5 equals a +20. That's kind of strange, but true. And Joe didn't ask for an explanation, since that often confused him. He simply liked to find out what the rule was and obey it. For those of us who don't just want to be told what to do, but demand an explanation, one will be given before the end of this book. Once we get to the distributive property, we'll be able to show that a negative times a negative gives a positive answer. If you're in a hurry to see the proof, read faster. Having fun with the new knowledge, Joe wrote a lot of multiplications all over the tabletop. A negative times a positive is a negative. Negative times a negative, positive. Positive times a negative is a negative. Negative times negative is positive. Positive and positive is a positive. And on it goes. When Fred taught algebra at Kitten's, he would write on the board, for multiplication, signs alike, the answer is positive. If the signs are different, the answer is negative. So now it's your turn. Complete your worksheet.